Joining us now from Cairo, our man in the Middle East. Good to have him with us, especially in a day where, well, they're at it again in Israel, telling the United States they got to get involved in something, another WMD war, saying that Iran has got all these nukes and here to break the whole thing down. You know what? Who better than our good friend in Cairo, our man in the Middle East for 8 years, Eddie Yeranian. Ed, good to have you with us.
I think the issue really is what Prime Minister Netanyahu did not talk about, which was Iran's ballistic missile program. I think that's what he's worried about. I think that's what a number of countries are worried about. Iran has actually fired missiles recently. Well, we spoke about it when it happened maybe 4 or 5 months ago. I can't remember exactly when. They didn't reach Israel, but they fell inside Jordan. They also fired missiles into Deir Zor. I think that was just an example to show the Israelis that they can reach their territory. And then they had a sort of a blowout with an Israeli plane that crashed. I guess it got hit inside Syria, probably, because it crashed right over the border in Israel. And yesterday, adding to the upset, if you want to call it that, there was an attack on several bases in Syria where apparently a number of Iranians were killed, according to Arab media. They said 18 out of 40 people were Iranian or belonging to Iranian militias. So there is sort of a low-level tension going on between Israel and Iran over Syria, above and beyond the nuclear program. And the nuclear program, well, it depends on how you look at it as to whether it's being observed or not observed. I mean, the issue, of course, is can Iran break out and build a nuclear weapon? And I think we know that they could. The time frame is certainly, it would take them up to a year probably to do that, and we would know about it before they got there. So a lot of the discussion, I believe, is an effort to renegotiate Iran's ballistic missile program, which wasn't part of the negotiations in the first place. So I think this is what President Trump and his advisors have in mind. He's been renegotiating trade treaties, aluminum, steel, or trying to renegotiate them, and everyone was crying that he was getting into a trade war with China. And I think I saw a couple days ago something showing that we had the smallest deficit with China in recent times. So, and obviously with North Korea, people were complaining that we were going to get into a nuclear war with Korea, and it looks like they're finally talking. So you never know. Saying you want to renegotiate a treaty doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get into a war.
I think he's got these countries to react. I mean, that's the objective of the tariff. He's not trying to raise revenue for our treasury by these tariffs. This is why this is so stupid. What you do with a tariff is you try to even the playing field and get the other country to react so that you can get a trade balance and they stop dumping manufactured goods in the U.S. in order to put our companies out of business in futuristic industries and in order to get our jobs back. And so, if they stop doing that and they take our goods in so we can balance the trade, then you don't need the tariffs. I mean, the tariffs are there to get the other country to react. That's why they're there. This is like the argument, Edward, is so asinine. The people that don't understand it is so ridiculous and so nonsensical. It's almost, me explaining it on the air has almost become like I'm on The Onion. It's like a comedy show. Okay, so here's what China does. Let me explain it again. Let's take a simple thing like LED lighting. Futuristic industry, right? Pretty soon there'll be no fluorescent lights. Everybody will have LED, right? You get that. Real easy. Well, here's what China does, okay? They manufacture all the LED lights bought in America. How do they do that? Well, they pay their people $1 an hour in a rice ball instead of $20 an hour. So they have a huge savings there in labor. Then that's still not enough. Then they take their Chi-Com government and they further subsidize the production, which means they give taxpayer money or however they collect their money in the communist government. They dump that into the industries, so the cost of production goes down even further. Then they take the lead lighting, they put it on a ship. They ship it to the port of Los Angeles. They dump it there. They pay a 2.5% tax to get it in the country. Then manufacturers in the U.S. that are making office buildings and schools and libraries and whatever else, ships, they need fluorescent lighting. So what do? They buy the Chinese lighting because it's $4 instead of $15 a lamp because they're subsidizing it. So what does that mean? Nobody in the U.S. can make lead lighting. They all go out of business. And then the Chi-Coms have cornered the market. They have the jobs. We don't. And we don't have a single company producing it because they can't compete. Now, how tough is that for people to understand, Edward? How many times do I have to explain it before people just say, okay, John, that makes sense. That's why he's putting a tariff on lead lighting so that we can manufacture it ourselves and be competitive. It is very simple math, but I cannot get these Wall Street gangster banksters and their lying message. I can't get people to understand the reality behind what these tariffs mean, and it's annoying to me.
Yeah,
I said my piece.
I see them doing the same thing in the rest of the world. Out here in Egypt, believe it or not, for something like Ramadan lanterns, all of them are made in China. The Chinese have destroyed the Ramadan lantern market, which arguably is not a very important market, but certainly in terms of iconic Egyptian industry, that was something that was fairly Egypt-centric, and now the Chinese are producing them. And, of course, with their Road and Belt initiative, they're trying to sell their products across all of Asia and all the way up to Europe, and they're doing similar things in China, in Africa. So you can see where you need pressure and renegotiation and efforts to level the playing field. But, of course, in more serious matters like nuclear or ballistic missiles, the ballistic missiles don't necessarily need to be nuclear unless they have a nuclear warhead. And we don't know for a fact that Iran is able to produce a nuclear warhead. They're probably very close to being able to do so. But in any case, you don't want an Iranian ballistic missile, which could potentially carry a warhead, going all the way to London, and certainly not to Washington or New York. Although we could probably shoot them down anyway. But certainly, I remember in 1985, President Reagan was going to deploy missiles. I wanted to say Patriot missiles. They weren't Patriot missiles. They were some other medium-range missile, I believe, in Germany. And the Germans were demonstrating. Everyone was upset, and they were saying this is going to create World War III. And that was 1985, and 4 years later, the Berlin Wall fell. So you never know. People who claim that we're setting off World War III all the time, you never know when you can set off World War III, and it doesn't necessarily have to be from Iran or renegotiating the JCPOA or whatever it's called, the treaty that we joint protocol. I can't remember what each initial stands for, but anyway, something of understanding.
Unbelievable what you just said. I want to get to, again, let's expand on Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. Okay, so all of a sudden, out of the blue, they have all this intel on the fact that the Iranians are producing or manufacturing, or they have capability to get nuclear weapons, and he's got all this evidence. And sounded like to me like he had an audience of one, and that was President Trump. Look, I mean, let me just ask you this straight out. If they have evidence that the Iranians are producing or in the midst of being able to produce a nuclear warhead, well, they've got jets and missiles. Why not just launch a raid at dawn and take them out? Why does he have to go on TV and try to get us to carry his water again? Why don't they just act?
Well, I think part of the problem was that we saw during the negotiations and leading up to the negotiations was that a lot of the Iranian production enrichment process was taking place way underground in places that were not easily reachable by the missiles that we have or the warheads that we have. And I think these bunker buster bombs that we used in a couple of places to demonstrate that we had them were made with the intention of showing the Iranians that, hey, we could possibly take their facilities out. I don't know if Israel, we gave these bombs to bunker buster bombs to Israel. Perhaps we did. I haven't followed that very closely. But in any case, I think that Iran has a lot of ways to retaliate. And Hezbollah is right on the border with them north of Israel, north of Galilee. I suspect, although I couldn't prove it, that Hezbollah, like Hamas, has been tunneling busily under the Israeli border and probably has multiple tunnels leading into their territory and could probably infiltrate Israel from the north if they tried. And you could get into a very messy rocket war because Iran has and the Syrians over the last 15, 20 years has supplied Hezbollah with, I don't know, maybe I've seen some reports saying like 140,000 rockets. Of course, these are not ballistic missiles, but they would certainly pepper Israeli territory pretty much three-quarters of the depth down south, all the way to the Negev, I think, and could very easily damage Tel Aviv to the point where it would look like a Syrian city with all those rockets. So I think that there is worry that something like that could happen very easily, and they're playing with matches right now inside Syria because Israel has bombed a number of targets which have hit Iranian people. Their drone program at the T4 air base, which is on the road, I guess, from Homs to Palmyra. This was about maybe 3 weeks ago, I can't remember, before President Trump and the British and the French attacked Syria, their parts of their research program, their chemical weapons research program, or whatever actually got hit. I know it was their research program. Did they hit any chemicals? I guess.
Look,
anyway.
I guess my question here is, I'm really getting tired of fighting Israel's battles, right? And this really sounds to me like let's get the U.S. sucked into another conflict here in the Middle East, because that's all. Israel's happy when we're sucked into the Middle East. And here, I get a text from Eric in Richmond. I'm going to read you this because I think this guy's spot on. He says, so, John, if Israel can get in and out with tons of documents, you mean they can't take out a production facility? Come on now. I mean, I think it's like there's a point, Ed, where Americans just have to say, okay, we've had enough, right? There were no WMDs. Saddam Hussein should still be there. We screwed up Gaddafi. He should still be there. We'd be better off. And now we got the Israelis again. They sucked us into Syria. Now they want to suck us into some other conflict. I mean, if they're concerned about their security, fire up the jets and go take it out. What do they need us for? That's my question. Just in 30 seconds, Why do they need us?
Well, I think our military-industrial complex is eager enough on its own to get involved in another war without even having the Israelis encourage us to do so.
Bingo. That's the answer, Edward. That's why you're on. You're the smartest guy in the Middle East.